Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Jeff Sirkin. I'm the founder and CEO of Sirkin Research. And today we're going to be concluding our webinar series around Martech as a strategic enabler. And my guest, as has been throughout the series, is Matt Malanga, the Chief Marketing Officer of NewsCred.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks everyone for joining today.
Yeah, quick logistical note, there's a Q&A, so as we go through, you should see a little link at the bottom of the Zoom. So feel free to type in any questions in the Q&A as we go, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. So all of this that we're sharing is commissioned, that we were commissioned by NewsCred for a survey, which included 450 plus marketing leaders in enterprise organizations. And I'll be sharing a lot of the insights from the research. And Matt has great perspective as an experienced CMO, and I love to get his take on these topics.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I'm not going to go through all the prior chapters. I think Jeff's going to kind of summarize that as we go through this presentation. And then we're going to conclude with kind of talking about why we believe the categories that are defined today are likely to converge or disappear as we move forward in the future.
Yeah, I'm excited to tie it all together and start to really talk about the solution. And so thanks to those of you who have been with us each week. And just as a reminder, the whole series is being recorded. And so we'll be sending out a link to those recordings at the end of the series. So at a high level, marketers are being asked to deliver growth through ROI. And that was pretty clear, 78% stating that as opposed to focus on operational efficiency. But now, in order to achieve this, it's a matter of leveraging technology to help deliver. And so for all of this, we really need to follow the sage advice of Wayne Gretzky and skate to where the puck is going, not where it is today. And the truth is, this is an uphill battle. Over the last few years, marketing has become so segmented in over 20 different specialty teams. And the response from a technology perspective has been to create a tool to solve each individual need. And that sprawl of the resources across the marketing organization has made it very, very difficult. And so today, technology is really just not a strategic enabler for marketing leaders, again, but we're going to get into why there's a lot more optimism in the future. And so last week, we introduced the concept of marketing orchestration. And each of these themes really will need to be executed in order to meet the goal of marketing to drive ROI. And these really are 5 legs of a stool. They all need to be strong. And this is no easy task. Only 8% of organizations have achieved orchestration, which means that they do all 5 of these either well or very well today. And as I mentioned, the specialization of people and technology in marketing has made it hard and it's obscured the big picture. And so there really are unmet needs across each of these themes. And so we asked in the survey how important each of these themes were to our responders and how successfully they are able to execute on them today. Excuse me. And the important part to me is really the gap between those two. And that's what these percentages here represent. And the two specifically I want to call your attention to are the performance data and analytics and integrations. And these really represent the biggest pain points for marketing leaders today. And the story really makes sense to me. As the stack has grown with all of the specialized technology, if it doesn't integrate well together, then you have to work that much harder to execute. And if the analytics aren't strong, you can't prove ROI to the business, and you can't really optimize your strategy without knowing what tactics are working best. So the good news is that people are bullish on the future of Martech. And nearly twice as many people feel strongly that it'll be a strategic enabler by 2025. And Matt, based on what we've seen in terms of where people are today, is it surprising to you that they're so bullish on the future?
Well, I'm bullish on the future. So I'm glad to see others are as well. Obviously, this looks like about 100% increase, compared to where how leaders are thinking about it today. And no, I'm not surprised, because at the end of the day, I think the way most leaders think about, based on the surveys we've run and the conversations we've had, is that, there's these themes or these 5 pillars of orchestration. They're not necessarily operating at at the highest levels for most companies. I mean, 8% saying they're all doing it well is kind of crazy low to me. Um, and so as I think about this, yeah, I think they're going to be looking at Martech to enable those components of orchestration. And so this is not surprising to me. And I feel quite optimistic that it might actually look a lot better than we think as we start talking about categories and category convergence.
Yep, agreed. And so within this, we wanted to dig in and see really what were those technologies of the future that are going to have the biggest impact. And so these were the four that really stood out of a pretty lengthy list that we looked at. Predictive analytics, AI, and machine learning. Those should be no surprise. I mean, that's going to be really across almost any facet of technology. And the dynamic creative optimization, this is automated personalization of content. But obviously makes a ton of sense since marketers are always moving to be closer to one-to-one communication. And the interesting one for us was that marketing orchestration software is already starting to show some promise for the future. And so, Matt, what are your thoughts on these technologies as the way they will have an impact on shaping that future?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, they boil down to letting computers or machines automate what humans are doing. Effectively take friction out of execution, improve how we navigate marketplace growth. And specific to orchestration, I mean, as we've spoken to these folks and said, well, what does that mean to you? Because that's not a word that shows up every day. Mm-hmm. I think their response was, well, it's the better automation of those pillars, the better automation of how those things work together, whether it's my teams, whether it's my processes, how we get our performance data integrated, how we integrate our content out to our channels. I think at the end of the day, the underlying theme for that one is also automation. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Great. And then, Matt, do you want to walk us through the life cycle of orchestration that we have laid out here?
Yeah. So during the course of these conversations, I think this is a good lead into how we think about, why we believe that categories are going to converge. Mm-hmm. And to set the stage for that, I think you need to lay out the orchestration lifecycle. And the reality is marketing doesn't execute like linear processes. It's not like project management fits neatly into the way marketers execute because we're much more agile. And I think this is a depiction of how most marketing organizations actually execute. So there's strategic planning where they leverage insights to help with planning. And that's where the allocation around budgets and resources occur. And eventually strategic briefs come out of the strategic planning. Then it goes into execution, whether it's content execution or asset creation. And it's very much where intake forms are taken if there isn't a strategic brief, requests come in, and then there's a lot of content and creative assets being created, reviewed, and approved. Most companies will have a governance overlay, meaning that they'll store that content and those creative assets. They'll make it, have controls around it, whether it's versioning control, and also having the ability to do publishing and sharing, typically in the context of like a digital asset management tool. And then there's channel execution, so that content and creative assets generally need to go somewhere, whether it's to your website, to your email systems, like a Marketo or an Eloqua, out to your social media channels, and obviously for sales enablement. There's obviously a much bigger list than just these four, mm-hmm. but those were a few we threw out there. And then lastly, I mean, if you really boiled it down, depending on who you talk to and where they are in the organization or what their objectives are, you could probably put marketing performance in like 3 buckets where, team efficiency, content analytics, and then campaign performance, generally channel and channel execution. And so collectively, these things are spinning in circles and going round and round. And this is, I think, how marketers truly execute whether we see it or not, depending on our role. Like, for example, if you're in content or in a content team, it might look just like that little piece to the right. But if you're in like operations, it might look a lot more like strategic planning. So most of what you do is actually at the top.
Right.
And so I think this is a good setup for like how we think about the way marketers truly execute or orchestrate marketing throughout a year or business period.
Well, then that's great. And do you want to talk about how, as we sort of switch this to the sort of the technology overlay, do you want to talk about how these categories play into it?
Yeah. And so this kind of boils down to like, why do we believe there's a reason for category convergence? Well, at the end of the day, analysts start drawing boxes around functionality. And generally, just like we have tools specifically designed for email or social media or for business analytics, what was happening is the vendors were building solutions specific to those parts of the orchestration cycle. But what you see in the survey findings is that it's not working great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't just solve for part of it, because if any part of this breaks down, you're going to have problems in execution, right? You're not going to meet your objectives of executing faster, doing more with less, be able to effectively and demonstrate results. And so what you're really seeing is vendors like NewsCred and other vendors who are not trying to solve a specific problem in one particular area, but a general problem, right? Which is, how do you better make sure that you enable the entirety of the orchestration process?
Yep.
And for that reason, you're seeing companies like NewsCred and others that are not saying like, oh, we just have a CMP, but well, the CMP needs to have MRM functionality. Because if you're in a content team, well, there's a lot of planning that's involved. It's also true for creative services. And for some, solutions, they might not have a dam. Well, that means you need to integrate into a dam. And I use the analogy of like building a car, buying a car. And the world today is a lot like building a car, where you're going to go out and source different parts of the car. And I think the future for the companies that are really being thoughtful and innovative, they're thinking about, how do you facilitate all of this so you're selling a platform that solves the orchestration problem, not just solving part of the problem.
That's right. That's great. And thank you for sharing that. And so for us to put a bow on this, around this whole series, to me, the specialization in marketing over the last decade or so has really led to this expansion of tools to meet those needs. The good news, again, is the future is very bright, and that marketers are very bullish on that future. And the key is through orchestration, which, remember, is a business process. It is not in and of itself technology. There are gaps in those unmet needs across those 5 themes. But the truth is, they are being executed today. They're just being executed in those silos. And so the thing for all of you to think about is, how are you going to solve that? Are you going to do it with many point solutions? And our recommendations, as Matt sort of alluded to, is to look for companies that are really developing for where the puck is going, and that are thinking about that convergence. And there are a handful of companies on the forefront today, and as we mentioned, NewsCred certainly is one of them. But choose your vendors carefully, because the other piece to keep in mind is that if they only build really for a general purpose, it'll likely not include all of the specific functionality that's needed and specialized by marketers.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
And there's a few questions, a handful of questions coming in. I think there's a really nice one that came in. It came in anonymous. Mm-hmm. Last week, you had shared that 8% of companies surveyed feel they have their Martech orchestration in a good place. Yes, that's true. So Jeff just shared that. Yep. So they responded, if I understand the survey correctly, Jeff, that they believe they do all 5 parts of orchestration well or very well.
Well or very well. That's right. Yep. Today.
Right. Mm-hmm. Is there an opportunity to learn more from them? Speak to them about how their approach to accomplishing this and their specific organizations. So the answer is yes. So I can tell you firsthand from having talked to them and talked to these companies that they don't look at orchestration as a technology. They look at orchestration as more of a business process, a business objective to get all these pieces to work together. And then they find the technologies that are going to help them accomplish that best. And so in the upcoming weeks, we are going to be doing additional webinar series. That will include customers that do this well. It will include customers that do this so-so, but have aspirations to do this well. And of course, they'll be doing Q&A with participants within the webinar series to answer any questions they have, like best practices, how they think about change management, considerations on how do you structure your organization, your teams, what change agents you need. And so you'll have a chance to talk to folks within this 8% that believe they do it very well. And you'll have a chance to talk to some folks who are still on their journey to doing all 5 well. I don't see any other questions. I appreciate everyone's time today. And as we roll out our future series, where you have a chance to meet firsthand with companies that do this well, we're looking forward to your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks for taking time out of your day over the course of the last 4 weeks. And I hope this has been helpful to reframe your view of Martech today and how it can become a strategic enabler in your organization. Thanks, everybody.